called this type of work um, soft skills, but to be honest with you, I consider this work hard skills because there are no complex systems like the human. We are all complex, we are all unique. So I don't consider it a soft skill to master the art of learning how to work effectively and efficiently with human beings. So here we go. Why grace? Well, it invites differences and allows paradoxes. Gracious space is not a conflict-free space. As people work together in community, it is inevitable that conflict will occur, and boy, do we know. Allows a more dynamic and comfortable place for all to succeed in. It's important to have a space for conflicts to emerge so that they can be addressed productively, which is extremely important. And it's an open space for conversation on how we can contribute to a healthy workplace during change by modeling grace. And again, it's not a conflict-free space. It's about how to introduce conflict so that it becomes a productive thing that we can approach. And that's our little book. It all started in college. We were assigned this book and I read it. It's like, great, good book. Then at work, I started applying it. And to be honest with you, that's when it really kicked in. And in management, it just helped our team feel unified during the pandemic. We were able to read the book. I just felt like it was important to send them each a copy of the book, and we were able to sort of practice gracious space in the workplace during such a huge unknown, which was COVID, as you all know. But there's something else that happened after that. And that is when I really saw the impact of gracious space from top down, because at the experience prior to that, it was my direct delivery of it, right? I worked for Lake Washington Institute of Technology, and it was a magical moment when Dr. Ruby Hayden, their vice president, addressed this book to me at our first introduction to each other. I couldn't believe it, right? This one book that I went to during the most challenging time in my career, and the one book that I recall, such a small book, but it was my favorite one in college. So applicable, so practical. That's the one book this wonderful vice president addresses. And they had invited Patricia Hughes to speak at Lake Washington, and I worked with them for a while. And to this day, I still remember that team dearly. Um, their application of gracious space was extremely evident. And part of that is the top-down approach. When you have your executive leadership belief in this type of work and it trickles down to your work team, we were not only addressing a pandemic, but we were addressing a modernization project where we were dealing with systemic change in a technology space and dealing with the pandemic and working out of the office and all the logistics that were around all of that. So I've just got to say that was quite the experience, and I encourage you to do this practice with your top leadership as well. So now back to you. What does grace mean to you? And if you could please either come off mute and share, it would mean the world to us. What does it mean to you? What was the setting? What did you experience? And you can also write it in chat, of course. We're going to give you a few moments for that.
Don't be shy. Feel free to raise your hand if you would love to come off mute
This is
or use the
Jay.
chat. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I have a puppy in the background that is doing his own thing, so you might see that.
Oh,
But
good.
I see grace as a reprieve from perfection, a reprieve from, the steady push and space to do what's needed. And that's one thing, like as you were speaking, Vanessa, that became very, very evident through the pandemic is how I've seen it manifested is I'm of a certain age, and work and real life has always been separated. And through the pandemic, what we were able to see is people in their actuality. They were parents, they have dogs. They they had things come up, and people were more apt to give space to that because that is real life. So it's a huge evolution in our occupational culture, I think. We're seeing things as they are instead of as we were told they should be. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Janae, right? That's so true. Those real aspects of ourselves, it's inevitable, and I really appreciate you sharing. Is there anyone else? Have been reading some wonderful chat comments here. Lots on respect, non-judgmental, allowing for conflict and imperfection. I think that we're gonna do just fine today.
Hey,
All
Vanessa.
right. Yes, we have someone
Okay.
else.
Yes, this is Bridget here, Bridget O'Michaels. Yes.
Bridget, yes, please share. How are
Yeah, I
you
was going to
today?
say to me, grace means maintaining composure and kindness, even in challenging situations. And for instance, you know, when you are able to give grace to someone else, even in a situation where you should have reacted the other way, let me just give you a vivid example. Say, for instance, you walk into, a room in your sparkling white shirt, you have a meeting, very important meeting, and somebody walks into you and spill coffee all over you. What would be your reaction to that? Will you first to react angrily, blame the person, knowing that you have, a meeting in front of you, or you demonstrate grace by responding positively, knowing that it was a genuine accident. So, in my own opinion, is as humans, whether in the workplace or in the society, if we take a minute to always, check in us, where can I show grace in my response in all that I do in every day to day interaction with another human being, or whatever it is that you are doing, that will really go a long way to helping us. Thank you.
Oh, that is so beautifully said. And I could just envision you mastering that coffee moment. And let me tell you something, Bridget, that is something I am working on myself because not always gracious,
Yeah,
especially on the road.
yeah. Thank
Someone
you.
cuts me off,
Oh,
not so gracious, but those moments make a difference. If you get to that place and you know that you approached a moment like that with grace, A plus, you're doing it.
thank
Thank
you,
you for
Vanessa.
sharing. All right. Well, please continue sharing your definition of what grace means to you in the chat. And if you want to pop in, this is a conversation. We're going to move on to the next slide. But again, if you think of something, feel free to just take the mic off mute and let us know. All right. What are the signs we see in our workspace that indicate a need for gracious space? And this is kind of a hot topic. Think about either your current workspace or previous employments where you could easily say, oh, that's a good opportunity. We should have been a little more graceful on the way we handled that. And currently, if you're in a place, what are the signs that are telling you, okay, we need to practice some gracious space in this place? Jeremy, that's thank you for sharing. Disengaged employees, Cindy. Okay, if you want to expand a little bit more on what that looks like, would love to hear. High levels of stress. Also would love to
Oh, okay.
hear that too.
Yeah. Can you
Mm-hmm.
hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just maybe people aren't engaged in the work, or they're withdrawing and they don't feel safe. And so maybe there's an absence of grace that way because they're not really showing up completely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that safety piece that you mentioned, they're not being safe enough to share, and that's an indicator of perhaps we need to practice more grace, increase the safety so that we can re-engage them and address the root cause of that, huh? That withdrawal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Oh, I love that, Jamie. Pushing for brave space rather than gracious space makes building gracious. Uh-huh. Can you expand if you wish on how that makes building gracious space extremely difficult? Because it seems like if it does polarize a little bit too strongly on speak up, be courageous, mm, do we have the grace to back that up, right? So I would love to learn what you have to
So,
offer on how to do that.
sure. So, my personal philosophy is if I create a space that's gracious and safe, my team will step up and be brave because then I have the opportunity. They know that I'm going to be there to support them. If you have somebody who's coming in and pushing you to be brave, but they have not provided that grace or space safe, it is impossible to be brave because you don't have that safety net. So for me, it's a difficult position to be in to get the understanding across that you need both. You need to have that gracious space safe first in order to create the courageous, brave space to move forward.
That is so well said and so true. Thank you for sharing and expanding on that, Jeremy.
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking about as a sign is we can often get very, very focused on the words instead of the message that people are trying to communicate. And so sometimes people may not have the right words. And by being gracious, we can then understand better what people are trying to say. But I often find, especially when we get to legislation, there's a lot of focus on words. And it's like, well, that word doesn't mean what I think it means, instead of thinking about the overarching message. So I often call into question people who are really focused on the words and saying, are you hearing the message or are you hearing the words?
Another great statement. Two things to it, right? And it's so powerful to actually dig in for the message. So I'm glad that they have you there to be able to direct it for the message and not so much for just the word choice. And we have some other great examples in the chat as well on definitions of indicators for that need for gracious space. We've talked about some really important things and before we get to that brave space, that space of courageousness, we need to have that grace. And a hot topic right now is vulnerable leadership. And it's great. I love the word. I just hope that we can model it and really, really know how to use gracious space so that it can address conflict effectively, because that's where the magic works. And there are some tools that are free, not just a book that is to purchase, free and available on the resource that we're offering in this presentation today that help us address conflict in an efficient way, how to invite the stranger, the opposite opinion, how to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Like I can really do some reflection, and when that reflection, I find that in micro moments, what was described by Bridget earlier today, when that coffee spilled on me, I don't go into my reactive mode right away, right? And that's when we start mastering this. It starts inside. And so we don't need to be perfect, but we definitely have the opportunity to grow in this space and turn feedback into an actual real practice in the workplace. Not just, here's a survey. We'll love to read about it later on. Mm, how are we doing? As in you and I, how's this relationship doing? How am I affecting you? And that's what we're going to get to today. We're going to use one of the tools. And if this becomes something you want to hear more about, please let us know. And we have lots more other tools that we can practice together. So let's move on and see what this slide deck has to offer us. Tool number one. Some of you may have heard of it. It's called the Johari window, and it's a blend of two names. Of course, there's so many blends of inventors' names out there, and this one's really cool. It's one window, it's got 4 panes in it, and it's so applicable and it's so real because we all have this open self, right? Like what you see right now in this presentation, this is my open window. This is Vanessa right now. And when you speak up, this is you right now. This is what you see, this is what I see. It's it's ourselves in the workplace, it's ourselves when presenting. Then there's the blind, and that's what we have no idea about. Like the feedback that comes our way sometimes, and we're like, what? How could you even taken it that way, right? Or in your personal relationships, I never said that, or I never meant to say that. Completely off guard. The impacts that you had no idea you've done. There's the hidden window, which you know is there and you know you're working on it. And it could be there could have, onsets like family of origin, experiences in the education system, your background, your ethnicity, experience in the community you live in, some past experiences in relationships, so on. These can create hidden causes, root causes to the way that we approach life. Oh, Kiana, thank you so much. I hope so. And this hidden window is where we start to challenge ourselves, right? We start looking at that window and that mirror, and we're like, ooh, I could have done that a little better. Yep, there's my mom coming out. And that's what we kind of want to work on. It's a good thing because there's edges, right? We have good edges. There's good reasons for the reason why we are today. There's survival skills. And of course, because we're human, because we're a system, we can always start leaning towards one end a little bit too strongly. So it's a really good window to practice. Obviously, as you can tell, it's probably my favorite one because I've been running on it too long. The last one is unknown. This one is the mysterious one. It's what we don't know. It's the budget cuts. It's the turnover. It's the private lives of your employees coming into play, and maybe they're not even aware, that it's affecting, it's leaking, it's your cold that's bugging you. It's the pandemic. And in that unknown, that's what we're preparing for, right? So that we're so prepared in the practice of feedback and keeping each other aware of our impact on one another and comfortable enough to talk to each other on that when we reach unknowns, we can address it, right? And one of the tips is that we must approach the Johari window tool um, in certain ways. Like you have to approach the person that you wish to complete this with openly, right? And as you don't just slap it on their desk and say, we need to do this. You have to ask for permission, see if they're open to it, and also see if they would like to participate in feedbacks. So it becomes a two-way convo. And then offer to complete one with them so that it's reciprocal. And if they're not so comfortable, open that space for the conversation. Don't just shut it down, of course, and see if they're open to it at another time. But definitely, we want to ask for the permission to talk about it. And in this link, ethicalleadership.org, we are able to, let me see if I can copy and paste into the chat. Oh, no, I can't. But later on, you're going to get all this follow-up information so that you can self-explore how to dig deeper into applying the Johari window in the workspace. And we're actually going to do a role play for you. So I'm going to also pull it up here so you can see you can ask yourself some critical questions while you're completing each of these windows. And just for demonstration, I popped it up, but we're going to go back to the slideshow. We're going to go back to it later on and actually practice it. Okay. Oh, thank you, Teresa. She just plugged it in for you. The second tool that we are just discussing about today, building a gracious space, is inviting the stranger, the person that has that opposite opinion. We tend to deviate towards the people that are like us. This is an invitation to invite the person that's your opposite and get to know them a little bit better. And here are 10 questions. We're going to hold some silent time just so that we can all read it, if that's okay. You can, pour some hot water back into your coffee cups or go get some more coffee, use the restroom if you like. Breaks are at your discretion again, but this is just a good moment to spend maybe a minute or two just reading these 10 tips on how to invite the stranger. Are these alternatives to doing a Myers-Briggs test? Absolutely not. I invite you to keep on that Myers-Briggs test practice. Absolutely not. But thank you for sharing. I would actually think that it would enhance it, don't you think? Because it's going into a conversational space, and you're welcome to plug in your thoughts as well. So let's just take a moment to read these. Be back in just one sec. Thank you.
Hey, Vanessa, this is Teresa. While folks are kind of reading through this list, can you talk a little bit more about when someone might want to invite the stranger and or why?
I love that. Thank you. So a good time is before we are too distant or triggered. Something I've found myself to do is I tend to avoid people that are completely at opposite ends sometimes, where they're just like so oppositional sometimes to what it is that I'm trying to like accomplish in a sentence. And when they're immediately like debunking it, I tend to just distance myself, like just presence wise, and then I start avoiding. And I think that's a really good time for me to challenge myself. And you're welcome to share with me how you think it's a good practice to invite strangers on. But personally, that's where I'm challenging myself. When I hear someone completely debunking or just, interrupting or just trying to steer the conversation away, instead of me just avoiding it, I actually lean into it and I praise them and I'll say thank you. Usually they have a good point. And that's where the invite the stranger comes in because all perspectives usually have some truth. So I'll lean in and I'll ask for a little bit more expansion. Like, oh, you know what? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? 'Cause I think I might understand what you're saying, but I just want to make sure. And then when they start, that's when the magic happens because I start to understand a little bit more and I can explain my perspective a little bit more. And then together we start heading towards the right direction. Had I not done that, I would have been blind to their side and I would not have seen their perspective. And lately, it's been doing some great things in relationships. So I appreciate your question, Teresa. Thank you, and I hope it answers it.
Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, I think Jeremy just put in a really good one. Anyone want to answer that one? Jeremy, you mean we're all not self-aware?
Yeah, it wasn't so much that I believe, people are always self-aware, but
No, it's
we
yeah.
have a lot of folks, I think, who are really just trying to get their job done. And
Mm-hmm.
they might see this as almost like a checkwitty list in some
Mm-hmm.
cases. That's
Mm-hmm.
not your intent at all, and I completely understand. But I've gone through and I've asked quite a few of these questions at the beginning of a project in particular. And people are saying, oh yeah, that's fine. Oh yeah, that's okay. Oh, this person, right? And then when it comes down to it, especially with number six, their ability to accept or tolerate differences, it really comes out of the woodwork. And so I'm just curious how you handle that, and
Oh,
how
that
you
is
how
such
you
a good
extract that.
question, especially in the projects that we're working on lately, the technology field. There was this speaker. Oh, I wish I could just remember where that was. They were speaking on an engineering place and how these engineers were just like going at it all the time, and they're trying to figure out things that are important for the project, right? They have due dates. They're trying to just get the work done. Very popular statement, just trying to get the work done. But bulldozing through the conversations and trying to get from point A to point B and rushing, not the soft skills, but the conversation skills, the dynamics, working through the people that we serve is not a soft skill. It's actually a skill that's going to help us put the oil in the machine so that it doesn't break when it starts running. And sure, your piece is being fitted, but at the end of the day, what's going to make everything run is the way in which we work together. And citing these best practices that are out there, the work in Kaizen, the work in the lean industry, the Toyota examples, all that reading that we've done. This the Center for the Ethical Leadership. Cite what you can use as a tool, because when you deal with moments like that, we often get challenged with, okay, great, that's just people skills, right? No, this is why, right? This is why this industry is leading this. And that's just my hunch, Jeremy, is citing, right? Using our tools as our reference. And if everybody's okay, we can move on. And again, you're going to get a copy of all of this. All right. So what not to do when creating a gracious space? This was a really good suggestion by Talia, who's our tech person today. So she's not talking too much today, but when we were talking about this subject, she brought something up that was really great. And she's like, we should talk about what we don't do. Like, how could we mess this up? And it's so true. Um, Number one, we're not going to be dishonest. We have to bring our real selves, right? And if you have other suggestions on what not to do, please blow up the chat because I know you're thinking of them. Don't be defensive. It is difficult to get feedback. Don't rush through the exercise. Don't forget to follow up. I really like the follow up one because how many of us have been in like a practice sort of like based meeting where, oh, we want to do this year, and then it just goes away. But if we practice it once a quarter, whatever it is that you need, then we keep that muscle, right, exercised. Don't be convinced that you are right. That's a really good statement, Eric. Thank you. When you come into something, you just think you're right. Is it really a conversation then? I like that. Don't push when not invited. Not everyone is open to feedback, so being mindful. Healthy boundaries for yourself. I like that too. That's important. We'll keep those coming. Thank you. Some of you may notice these pictures and the characters on here. So are we okay to start taking some of this into action and practice? We good? Okay. Thanks, Alenka. Meeting people where they are. I do like that statement. And sometimes if you have anything else to add to that, please feel free to step in and share a little bit more of how you like to meet people where they are.
Vanessa, Jeremy had a great question right before Alinka. How long does it take in your experience to complete some of these tools? I know it can vary from person to person, but just kind of your experience.
You know, Jeremy, that's a really good question. A Johari window, you're going to see today how long generally it'll take because we're going to practice one. I would keep it safe to carve out about an hour to do a reciprocal Johari window, but just one, for example, if you want to like set the model and just sort of like teach it to a group like, hey team, just want to teach this tool. This is what it's about. You read your resources on it, you want to share back, and then you want to model it like something that we're going to do today. It could take as little as 15 minutes to 30 minutes, like a demo. But I think it's safe to carve out an hour to do a whole Johari window because it will lead to more conversation. Um, are you looking for something that's like an express type of a thing because of some time constraint?
No, it was just kind of like what's on average. I think you answered it. Thanks, Vanessa.
Okay, alrighty. Well, this is going to be kind of fun. Please write in comments any words that come to mind when you think of yourself and how others may perceive you. Something that would go into your open window. Just blow up the chat, things you already know about yourself. Just, I know I'm this, I know I'm that. Generally, these are good things and not just don't bash yourself the whole time. Optimistic, organized, direct, fun, receptive. Oh, that's a nice word. I don't think I've ever heard that word. What does that mean, Janae?
It means I talk a lot.
Huh? Does it really?
Loquacious, yes.
Oh, I'm gonna use that forever now. Thank you.
And then I actually said, I often talk too much.
Awesome. And as you start thinking about things that you might hear in the future, like go into your blind space, these are the things where I don't know if you've ever been in a feedback session where someone says, you realize you sounded this way when you said that, and you're like, oh my gosh, that is totally the opposite of my intention. And then you hear it again from somewhere else. You're like, are you serious? So those are the things that are, they're kind of in the blind space, but we're wanting to bring them into the hidden to then we're aware of, and then we turn them into strengths eventually. And those are things I'd love you to think about. For the sake of practice, we're just going to pretend that we're filling a blank template of that Johari window. And if you need to see it, I can pull it up. With Bowser from Mario World, if that's what you connect to. That was my number one, but this was another great suggestion by Talia. She's like, why don't we bring in another character that maybe other people feel more connected to? So she brought up Cobra Kai's Jesse. So these are two known bullies from just entertainment, and just this is for play. We are again just, pretending that we're filling out a blank template. What would their Johari window look like based on what you know? What are their unknowns about their childhood? Right, Talia, that's right. Mario. My niece made me watch the movie and then I got it. I was like, oh, okay. So, what are their unknowns about their childhood which led to their evil behavior or feelings? And please blow up the chat or just say them. And I'm going to show you what that area looks like. What were those root causes that kind of led to those traits? And what could be their edges? What are their blind spots? What should they be working on? That's right, Sarah. Sometimes our positive traits or strength can be perceived as negative by other people or strangers. It's so true. That's why it's so complex. It's a hard skill. This is hard stuff. Teresa, back on the fun practice of our two bullies, tough, strict parents. Yep, that didn't show them the love. Jealousy. Yep. Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about childhood adversity, right? What all that can build up a lot of like survival mode, but then again, if we lean too much on certain things, we can be a little bit too bully-ish. Jealousy. All right. If anybody else has other things to add, we're gonna go back to the slide deck. Physicality strong. Oh, that is so true. Competition for family attention. Didn't have a lot growing up, right? Alenka, thank you. That's true, Cindy. Not able to sustain healthy relationships sometimes repeated failures can hurt so much that it can bring up a little bit of defensiveness. Like it's hard. It's hard to face feedback. The earlier the better, huh? Alrighty, well, how are we doing on time, my people? Are we doing okay? I think we've just got enough time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, looks like we
Okay.
got lots of time.
Well, here we go. I'm getting a little nervous because this is pretend world, but some of these things can feel real. And just gonna put myself out there, and Teresa's been gracious enough to lend herself in front of all of you to be able to practice a Johari window together for the first time. We're going to pretend like we are close coworkers. We've been working together for about a year, and it's time. It's time for a little feedback session. And we're just going to start it now, if that's okay with you all. I'm going to approach Teresa, and here we go. Teresa, we have been working
Hey.
together for about a year. And I just want to say I really, really, really appreciate you for carving out some time in your calendar to meet on this. I know how busy we are. We have stuff we need to get done. And I just can't express enough appreciation for you to just accept it.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I've really enjoyed this year of working together, and yeah, it's been great getting to know you.
And now that we're facing the next year, we've had some challenges this year, and boy, have we had some trials that we're facing and we're still facing. I've been reading this book, and it's just kind of reminding me of some things that I need to practice regularly. And I thought of you because you and I have been working together for about a year, and I'd love to just open myself up and see how I'm impacting you as a coworker, as a person, how I'm coming through, like what my language feels like, what my work feels like. So that way I can stop and I can take a look at it from, a different perspective than my own and tweak it if I need to in any way so that I can build our relationship into a really strong bond so that we can work really, really well together in this new year and achieve a lot of success together. If it's okay, I'm gonna bring up a tool and it's simply because it's going to help it feel a little bit more natural to just give each other some funky stuff if we have to. And
Yeah.
it's called the Johari window. And I'm going to pull it up if that's all right, so that we can just take a look at it. It's got four windows. And the first one is what are some traits that I do in my community? And if it's okay with you, I'm going to ask for permission. Are you okay for us to do this? Is it
Oh,
comfortable for you?
yeah, absolutely. I'd love to help you out.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. What are some of the traits? This is the first thing that I'd like to know, and it's kind of the easier one that are obvious about me. Like, what are the things that, you know, that are just like out there that I bring to the space?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I have to say you are very welcoming, very open, Vanessa. I feel like when I first started, at OFM and on your team, you were one of the first people to greet me and to welcome me. So that's something that I really appreciate about you. You're very productive. You are always, on top of all of your assignments. You are always kind of cranking out the work and, creating a good product. You're definitely knowledgeable, well educated, not only, book smart, but I think you just have a really great perspective and kind of insight to certain things, not just at work, but you are always giving great life advice, which I can absolutely appreciate and take forth in my own life. And I think you're pretty tech savvy. You are always kind of jumping in whenever we need support, whether that's at meetings or um, you know, any sort of event that we have, you're always willing to kind of jump in and show us how to make things run smoothly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wrote those down, and now we're going to go to a little of the side that are the sides I'm leaning too much on, things that I may not be aware of, and I'm going to be extremely appreciative of you and being completely honest and just saying, hey, you know what? The other day you kind of rushed this, or you did that, or you might have done that, just so I know specifically how I may be leaning too much on a certain trait and how I can improve that. So if you could just let me know what sort of blind areas you think I may not be catching right now.
Uh, well, and I mean this with all the love, of course. Um, you know, because of, your productivity, you're used to working like very fast, kind of cranking things out. Sometimes it's a little too fast. For example, a couple weeks ago when you and I and Talia were tasked to work on a report together, you kind of went ahead and created the report yourself, and then kind of after the fact pulled Talia and I in, which, it's fine in all dandy, but we are here to support you, and it kind of leaves us to I guess learn in a different way, if that makes sense, rather than kind of in a shared environment together. What
Thank you.
else? Yeah. And that, kind of goes hand in hand with just leaving folks behind sometimes. I know, like I mentioned, because you are so productive and used to kind of working at that fast pace, others on the team may sometimes feel like they're not able to keep up, kind of discourages us a little bit. It kind of makes us think that maybe are we just too slow? Are we, not keeping up, at the pace that you desire? So, we could often feel like we're just not as capable.
I
Um,
cannot express more appreciation for the honesty that you've just shared in these edges, and I'm definitely writing them down because it's something that, of course, is important. The way that I impact my teammates, the speed, the ambition, and if it's okay with you, pretend world. After this Johari window that we're doing on myself, we can continue practicing this with our teammates so that we can all be aware of how we're impacting each other. There's so many root causes to the way that we bring ourselves to the workplace, and I just want to thank you for this because I may be leaning too much on that in that area of I'm just trying to be an efficient person of our team, and I may be overdoing that because I'm already there and I don't need to overdo it. Now I can show my support to the team, and I appreciate you bringing that up and just bringing it to light because I want to see my team shine. And one of the things that I've always had to work on is dealing with a little inner insecurity that I had as a child that transitioned from place to place and having to get to know new people and new schools and having to demonstrate that I'm just not this new kid that comes from this place, but I'm actually capable of learning this and I can be part of you. So now that I am part of our team. I want to be able to empower everyone, hold back a little bit on the productivity and the end product because that's a group effort. And so I will be holding that in my mind to seek opportunities to observe and to support my teammates in doing and allowing them to lead the work so that I can just be of support. And I thank you so much. We're facing an unknown this year. As we know, the project is turning quite differently, and having this session with you will allow me to enter that space in more of a collaborative stance rather than too much of a, bulldozer. Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Teresa.
Thank you. And thank you for just kind of sharing a little bit about just kind of your background and where that comes from. I think that's important for me to know. And I know just kind of gives a little bit different perspective. We're only seeing just kind of work Vanessa. So being able to understand, the why behind that is very helpful and just kind of opens my eyes a little bit. So thank you.
All right. And
And
closing
scene.
and scene. So, in a perfect world, your person giving you your feedback would be open to feedback as well. It leverages it out. It makes it an equal space, right? So, I encourage you to take this tool, practice it with your teammates. It's never too late, it's never too early. And get those muscles working on building a gracious space this year. It was an honor presenting for you today. Felt more of a facilitation. I like that feeling a little bit more so that you can participate a little bit more. We have some magnificent practitioners out there doing some amazing work, and I encourage you to continue doing what you do. It can be discouraging sometimes, but don't give up. This is the hard stuff. This isn't the soft stuff. Thank you. And these are some resources available to you. We are all done with today's presentation and have a beautiful day. Thank you.
Yay. Is there any questions while we have Vanessa? Any questions after you kind of saw that in action? Anything,
I had a
Yeah,
question.
please.
So this required a great deal of vulnerability. um, and I'm wondering, I would think to prepare oneself, um, that when you share, you have to be prepared that what you share, because you don't really know this person, but you'd have to be prepared for whatever you share being out there in the zeitgeist. And so, one thing that I would be cautious about is sharing what you're only um, able to handle coming back at you in directions that you may not have thought of. Because if you share something that is really too close to your heart that you yourself have not dealt with, to have it come back at you in a different way can be kind of devastating. And so I've seen this happen. I've been close to a situation where this could have happened if I hadn't really dealt with what I was sharing in, especially when you're talking about going to the unknown, the hidden area, excuse me, or the unknown. um like we were speaking of with our fictitious characters, there could be a lot of raw hurt and emotion that is tied to that. So I guess that's what I'm asking. I appreciate the vulnerability, but at the same time, I think we have to be wise with what we share. Does that make sense?
So true. I think it was Teresa earlier who shared that we need to know our boundaries. And as we do the practice and as we do the work, doing that work within ourselves, it was one of the first things we were talking about is it all starts within, right? It starts with ourselves. So that's a great point. Let's practice with ourselves. What would a Johari window look like if I were to fill it out for myself? And in our fun exercise, we were asking ourselves what would go into our open window. And then we took a silent moment and, what could go into my blind window if it were out there? And practicing it within yourself might be a good way to get it going, and also doing a lot of that work, because definitely not having those boundaries, what would you say, Teresa, could lead to, yeah, some really deep
Yeah,
things.
absolutely. And I'll just add too, just from my own perspective, I did a lot of kind of shadow work and kind of diving within like these last like 2 years. And I would say, Janae, like you said, it can kind of reopen some of those wounds, that you just might not be expecting. So like Vanessa said, practicing on yourself might be helpful. But I also think too, and Vanessa, I'm not sure if this is, an option with the Johari window, but I wonder if being able to hear your open areas and your blind spots and maybe take that pause, because sometimes you don't really know where some of those blind spots are coming from. And it takes a little bit of more kind of self-reflection and kind of visiting the root cause of that. So those might just not be super apparent to you at first. So if you're able to kind of take a pause between, diving into, well, what are those hidden areas that others don't know about, that is kind of causing my reactions to certain things, or causing those blind spots that I might not necessarily see for myself. So, giving yourself some grace and space to work through that on your
Mhm.
own, and and give yourself that grace. I think that's so important
That is
because
so
it's
important.
hard. It is hard work, but you can't be aware of how to change unless you do take steps to dive
Hmm.
in.
It's not soft spot stuff. It's hard stuff. We were doing some emotional intelligence work, and one of the things that I warned my team about is, folks, myself, I was having some increased like emotion in those months that I was the emotional intelligence leader, because I was doing so much of that work that I just warned the team. I'm like, you know what? Tread carefully. This is gonna bring stuff up. And I think it's a really good disclaimer to put out there when you start practicing it more and more with your team. Like, this might bring some stuff up. So make sure you do some self-care, right, Janae?
Thanks. Great question and great
Yeah.
observation too.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. If you need to, you might just need to kind of step away for a second and say, I'd love to continue this conversation, once I have a chance to kind of process some of that. It's always a good option too.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Vanessa? Great point, Janae. Love that. Awesome. Shannon just had a great, point. Just building vulnerability starts with practice, and that's why we start with grace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm. And I love the point that Shannon also made on working with these axes and how these kind of play into each other. And then as we start, becoming more balanced, they start sort of like interacting a little bit more and more. Love
yeah,
that.
yeah, I love that.
Alrighty, well, thank you. And Talia, thank you for putting in your survey. If you've got any feedback. I will be so appreciative of that. Thank you. And thanks again, Teresa and Talia, for the invitation.
Yay, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Thank you, Vanessa, for being with us today. We really appreciate it. And